Hare Krishna, and welcome to another Monday evening in the lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. I'm your host, Chaturapma Das. Very happy to have you with us. Those of you that are joining us in the chat room, a handful already, and those of you that are joining us that have chosen not to go into the chat room, we like to welcome all of you. We do, of course, great appreciation to the devotees here at Krishna.com for facilitating this program, as they facilitate so many of the wonderful programs that help to keep all of us Krishna conscious. My wife and I were just discussing this morning how wonderful, because of circumstances, we're not able to get to the temple in the morning many times, and having Krishna.com with all of the different video cams in all the different temple communities makes it so wonderful. You can be sitting on the East Coast attending Guru Puja and at the same time be attending Mangal Arati on the West Coast. It's quite amazing, quite amazing. What to speak of in the evening at Mangal Arati in Vrindavan. So, of course, we're very thankful to the devotees here at Krishna.com. And those of you that would like to help support the work that the devotees here at Krishna.com are doing, feel free to go to Krishna.com/donations, and they can guide you through anything that you would be able to offer to help with these different programs. Bhakti and Carol, nice to see you back in. So you had to go out and take care of some laundry matters. And Bhakti Jeff is joining us there in the chat room. He's been listening very regularly, but this is his first week joining us in the chat room as well. I see Bhakti Patrick is back too. So we're very happy to have all the devotees here with us. Tonight, we're going to speak about a very wonderful devotee. As I mentioned earlier in the chat room notice, that we're going to speak about Srila Narahari Shakar Thakur, very dear and intimate associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and give a little bit of background about his life. Those of you that are in the chat room and like to post questions as we go along, you're more than welcome to. We'll tend to those questions at the top of the hour. That's the format that we've been doing. It seems to work quite nicely like that. So we'll get started right away. Srila Narahari Shakar Thakur was born in the village of Srikhanda. This village of Srikhanda, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami speaks very wonderfully about the devotees that lived there. He describes how the residents of Srikhanda, the village itself, formed a major branch of the desire tree of devotional service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He goes on and names some of the other associates that live in Srikhanda: Mukunda, Raghunandana, Chiranjeev, Sri Sulochan, Sri Damodar Kaviraj, Sri Ramchanda Kaviraj, Sri Govinda Kaviraj, Sri Balaram Das, Sri Ratikanta, Sri Ram Gopal, Sri Pitambar Das, Sri Satyanandana, Sri Jaganananda, and many, many others. Kaviraj Goswami describes that these devotees are very well known for distributing the fruits of love of Godhead generously to anyone and everyone. This is described in the Adi Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Just a side note, those of you that are in the chat room, if you can just give me feedback if the sound and picture are good or not. We only know from the feedback we get, because we don't have an automatic loop here to read off of one computer what's going on. So if there's any problems, just feel free to let us know. Okay, so it mentions that Narahari Shakar's family, they were actually the pride of all the Vaishnavas of Srikhanda. I was thinking about this. In each temple, in each community of Vaishnavas, there's always one family that are just like, they're everything, They're just so wonderful, and their activities are always so very absorbed in devotional service. Their mood of serving the Vaishnavas is so nice. And as a result, everyone becomes very proud to have such devotees in their community. I'm sure each of you listening out there, no matter how big or small your devotional community is, or the community that you visit, there's one family there that just really stands out like this, and everyone appreciates them and wants to have their association like that. Here in New Raman Reti Dham in Alachua, we're blessed to have so many families like this, So, at any rate, this was the view that everyone had of the family of Narahari Shakar Thakur. And actually, by their influence, all the residents of Sri Khanda were able to become Vaishnavas, become greatly elevated devotees. It mentions the entire village was turned into a branch of the desire tree of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We mentioned that when describing the different residents there. And so, since the time of Lord Chaitanya, it should be noted that this city of Sri Khanda was known as a seat of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It was a very prominent place like this. Actually, the phrase, we hear this phrase a lot now, Mayapur Vasi, or Vrindavan Vasi, and sometimes we think maybe this is a new phrase, but this phrase is actually used describing some of the residents. In the Adi Leela, once again, Kaviraj Goswami, he mentions that the Sri Khandavasi, Mukunda, he describes him as a Vasi, as a resident of Kunda, Sri Khandavasi Mukunda, and his son Raghunandana were the 39th branch of the tree of Lord Chaitanya's devotional service. Narahari was the 40th, Chiranjeev the 41st, and Solochan the 42nd. They were all big branches of the all-merciful tree of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They distributed the fruits and flowers of love of Godhead anywhere and everywhere. So these are the descriptions Kaviraj Goswami gives in his Chaitanya Charitamrita. Actually, even in our somewhat recent history, we have Jagannath Das Babaji, Srila Jagannath Das Babaji. He once stated that Navadvip is the abode of Goloka, and that Vrindavan is the abode of Gokula. And then he added that Sri Khanda is the abode of Vaikuntha. So he put it right up there with these wonderful devotional places of the Lord's pastimes. So Sri Narahari Narahari Shakar Thakur was born in Sri Khanda around 1479-1480. One of the two, maybe just at the end of one, the beginning of the other, the fall season, something like that. His father's name was Sri Narayana Das, and his mother's name was Srimati Goi. And they had actually 3 sons. The mother and father had 3 wonderful boys, Mukunda, Madhava, and Narahari. Actually, Raghunandana Thakur was Mukunda's son. You'll all remember, I'm very sure, we've spoken about it on many occasions, but this wonderful pastime when Mukunda's... actually, I should mention the family were a family of doctors. They were physicians. And, of course, we know Mukunda was a doctor and had to go away on business and ask his son to take care of providing the prasadam for the bhoga for the deity, and the deity ate everything. And the boy was able to entice the deity to eat by his simple prayers and crying for the deity to take their prasad. So, and then when the father returned, he didn't see, and he was looking for the Mahaprasad for his meal, and so he asked the boy, make an offering again. And in this way he watched as the deity, being very full, only ate portion of a laddu. So this was the son, this was the residence there. We want to take a second and welcome Manjesh, who's back in our chat room. It's always good to have him on board. Hare Krishna Prabhu, good to have you with us. So, Srila Narahari Shakar Thakur, 2 exalted brothers, Madhava and Mukunda. His father and mother, great devotees and physicians in their own right, Narayana Das and Srimati Goi. And so the family, of course, were very, very fixed in the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In due course of time, as will happen, Narayana Das passed away from this world. And when Narayana Das passed away, the older brother, Mukunda, he took charge of the family. I just had the occasion this past weekend to perform a Shraddha ceremony for one family here who lost one family member, and this is after the passing of the mother and father and several of the aunts, and now the brother has passed away, and this one devotee son has taken responsibility for the entire family. He's the eldest son. He's the responsible personality, and this is the natural course of things. So in the same way, when Narayana Das passed away, the oldest son Mukunda took the responsibility for the family needs. And he arranged that the boy, the youngest boy, this was Narahari, would go to Navadvip for his education. While in Navadvip, he stayed with family friends, and it mentions that he very, very quickly became learned in all of the different forms of education and learning and knowledge, and especially he became very knowledgeable of music and dance and how they were applied, how these arts were applied in the realm of devotional service. Now, thinking in this way, I was reflecting in our own community here. For instance, we have many of you know these devotees, the Mayapuris, that are traveling and doing kirtan, and they have their home base here in New Ramanreti. And Vishwambar Prabhu, Bali, Balaram Tirtha, as he's initiated now, Krishna Kishore, these devotees are very expert in the knowledge of music, but also, more importantly, how that music is used in the service of the Lord for kirtan. And then, of course, in referring to dance, we have Anupayani Dasi, who lives here in our community, the most expert of dancers, and her younger sister Kumari, who have trained so many other young ladies in the wonderful, wonderful art of devotional dancing for the Lord. So in this way, these art forms are used, and Narahari Shakar Thakur was not unknown to these. He was very expert in the music and dance and writing songs. Matter of fact, it mentions well before meeting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had written many Sanskrit and Bengali songs glorifying the Vrindavan pastimes of Radha and Giridhari. So in this way, he was, very well versed and learned in these arts. Now, when Srila Gadadhar Pandit, we all know Gadadhar Pandit, of course, the very close and intimate associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was constantly by the Lord's side during the Navadvip Lila. And this was actually the arrangement of the Lord, that Mukunda, the older brother, would send Narahari to Navadvip for his education, because then he began this opportunity of associating with Mahaprabhu. Excuse me. So, Narahari had the good fortune to enter into this intimate association and become a very close associate of Gadadhar Pandit. And as a result, in this way, he became very, very dear to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And actually, he had a personal service. We note in the different Shastras, there's always a mention of a devotee service. We were speaking last week how when Govinda and his brother Kashishwar Pandit joined Mahaprabhu's time, that they were given, Govinda's service was to take care of the personal needs of Mahaprabhu, and Kashishwar's service was to clear the crowds and distribute the prasadam. So everyone has a service like that. So Narahari's service was to fan the Lord with a chamara, with a yaktail fan. And Bhaktivinoda Thakura has immortalized this song, which I'm sure everyone out there is familiar with, the Gaur Arti that we sing in our temples every evening. Narahari Adi Kori Chamara Dulaya Sanjaya Mukunda Vashu Goshari Gaya. So Sanjaya Mukunda, they're mentioned there. Particularly Narahari is mentioned as waving the chamara like this. So Bhaktivinoda has praised him for this service like that. So the opportunity for Narahari Shakar Thakur to participate in many of the different pastimes of Lord Gauranga was certainly abundant to him. And these activities that he participated in were very uncommon because he himself was a very uncommon personality. We know from the book Gora Gona Desha Dipika, we mentioned last week that Kavi Karnapur, who we spoke about extensively last week, he wrote this book describing the different associates of Mahaprabhu and their identity as it was revealed during Krishna's Leela. So there's a very wonderful verse from that book that describes that she who was previously Radharani's intimate girlfriend named Madhumati is today Narahari Thakur, one of the Lord's dear associates. Now, of course, Madhumati, Madhu means honey. So someone who's very, very sweet, named after honey like this. Bhakti Ratnakar goes on to describe that Srila Narahari Thakur's glories are most uncommon. In Braja, he was Madhumati, whose good qualities knew no limit. So both of these Shastras here are confirming this identity. This identity was further confirmed one time by Lord Nityananda. Of course, we know that Lord Nityananda had a tendency to be very playful and very humorous in his pastimes. And so he came to Navadvip one time. He arrived in Srikanda. Mukunda was visiting. Narahari was staying there at the time. And when Nityananda arrived, he approached Narahari and he said to him directly, he said, "All right, we all know who you are. So where's the honey, Madhu?" So Nityananda teased him in this way because, as I mentioned in Krishna Lila, this was his activity, to supply the honey, the Madhu, to Sri Radha and Giridhari. So he said to him, he said, "Where is the honey? You were supposed to be supplying it to us." So immediately Narahari took a pot and he went to a nearby pond and he dipped that pot in that pond and it immediately turned into honey. And he took that back and fed it to Nityananda. And Nityananda and all of his cowherd boy associates drank from that pot till their full satisfaction, becoming highly intoxicated on this honey beverage. And in this way, this pond there in Srikanda became known as Madhu Pushkarini. This means the pond from where the honey came. So those of you that get the opportunity should travel to Srikanda and go and take some nectar from that pond. So there was another time that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally appeared in a dream to Narahari, and he ordered him to install 3 deities of himself, of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And these 3 deities are still to this day worshipped in Srikanda, in Katwa, and in Ganga Nagara. These 3 towns are where you'll find these deities. So 3 more places to go and travel. Actually, if we just spent the rest of our life traveling around Bengal, we can find all these holy places. His Holiness Jai Pataka Maharaj and His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj take the opportunities of taking devotees on these parikramas around the Mayapur Navadvip area. I had the good fortune in 1985, as the Padayatra was making its first finish of the tour of all of India and ending back up in Mayapur, to be with them for some number of days as they traveled throughout Navadvip and the different areas of Mayapur, and all these wonderful pastimes are there. Very, very nice. Very, very nice. Sri Narahari Thakur Thakur also was a part of the Lord's pastimes in Jagannath Puri. He and all the other residents, as I mentioned, they would come every year. You remember we talked last week about Kala Krishna and how Kala Krishna ran into some difficulty with the Badaharis in South India, and therefore when they returned, Mahaprabhu rejected him. Nityananda had mercy upon him, as many of the other devotees, and he arranged for Kala Krishna Das to go back to Bengal and tell everyone about the activities of the Lord. And of course, what this did was this encouraged everyone to immediately want to begin their annual pilgrimage to Jagannath Puri to be able to see Mahaprabhu. So they made all the arrangements to go to Puri. As we've discussed, Shivananda Sain took care of everyone's lodging and meals and the tolls and all like that. And in this way, the Brajvasis, the Kandavasis, were amongst those that attended. It mentions actually that first the residents of Srikanda would come to Navadvip. Mukunda, Narahari, Raghunandana, they all arrived at Advaitacharya's house as they would prepare to join the devotees headed to Nilachala. This is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita as well. Now, once arriving in Jagannath Puri, they took part in all of the wonderful pastimes that were part of the Puri experience with Mahaprabhu at that time. You can just imagine if we were fortunate enough to have been there. Every day was some kind of a festival in Mahaprabhu's association. So during this time would be the Snan Yatra. And of course, as those of you that are familiar with the Jagannath pastimes, after Snan Yatra, what would happen is that the Lord would go into seclusion, and the devotees would not be able to have his darshan. So in this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go to the Alanath temple, which is a temple very close by, and he would get relief from his feelings of separation by going to this temple, because he was not able to see Lord Jagannath. When the devotees would arrive there, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya turned to Gopinath, and he inquired from Gopinath, this is described again in Chaitanya Charitamrita, who are the devotees that have come here? And the devotees were named off: Narahari, Mukunda, Raghunandana, Chiranjeeva. All the residents of Srikanda had joined for this procession to Alanath to get the darshan there. Now, we also mentioned last week that during the Kirtan festival, there were during the Kirtan of the Rath Yatra festival, there were 7 parties, and that each of these parties were composed of different devotees, and one entire group of the 7 parties, one of the parties was all the devotees from Srikanda. Goswami, Kaviraj Goswami writes that Narahari and Raghunandana, they were the dancers in this group. So, of course, as we mentioned, Narahari was very expert in the activities and of music and dance, and so of music he would use by composing devotional songs, and of dance he would dance very wonderfully in the Rath Yatra pastimes of the Lord. Many times we may have the good fortune to receive a direct instruction from the spiritual master. Devotees that have met Srila Prabhupada and been given a specific instruction from him, they're empowered by embracing that instruction. Those of us that have taken initiation, those devotees that have taken initiation from Srila Prabhupada's followers and have received a specific instruction, by embracing that instruction, we get very special potency. Narahari actually was given a very specific instruction by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that instruction was that he should always remain in the association of the devotees. Now, I was thinking about this. This is such a wonderful instruction. Lately, I've had the good fortune, due to circumstances I found myself in, to appreciate the association of the devotees, of the Vaishnavas, to really be thankful for having such association. Even previously, in my previous occupation, I was traveling a lot and was away from the temple many, many weeks of the year. And as a result, I began to greatly appreciate being able to come to the temple and associate with the devotees. So, in this way, this should be our mood, that we appreciate Vaishnavas. But in this particular case, Narahari was instructed by the Lord, you should always remain in the company of devotees. This was his instruction. So, what a wonderful instruction if we could take that to heart and embrace it, and ourselves stay in the association of the devotees. Now, as would be the natural course of things, the disciples and the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would then go out and initiate additional members. And Narahari Sakar similarly did the same thing. He initiated Sri Lochan Das Thakur and many other personalities. And actually, Lochan Das Thakur was instructed and given the mercy of Sri Narahari Sakar Thakur to compose the classic Vaishnava literature on Lord Chaitanya called the Chaitanya Mangala. These, of course, we've mentioned many times, the 3 prominent Chaitanya literatures: Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Mangala, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. These 3, of which Chaitanya Charitamrita is the preeminent source of all the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, Lochan Das Thakur, being a very dear disciple of Narahari Shakar Thakur, actually opens in the beginning of his Chaitanya Mangala the following prayer. My Thakur, my Guru, is Sri Narahari Das Thakur, who is very influential amongst the Vaishnavas. He is continuously absorbed in Krishna Prema, and in fact, his body knows nothing but Krishna. To his followers, he speaks of nothing other than Krishna. He was previously known in Vrindavan Lila as Madhumati, and was a storehouse of sweetness, honey, and very dear to Srimati Radharani. Now, he is present in Kali Yuga with Sri Gaura Sundar as Sri Narahari. He is the keeper of the storehouse of love of Radha and Krishna. So this is in the Chaitanya Mangala of Lochan Das Thakur. He makes note like this. So, this is a very wonderful way to begin any endeavor to appreciate and glorify one's spiritual master. Actually, the musical training that Narahari had gave him not only songwriting abilities, but he was also a poet as well, a kavi, as they say. And so as a songwriter, he wrote many, many songs about the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. As we mentioned in the beginning, prior to meeting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly, he wrote many songs glorifying the pastimes of Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. And then upon meeting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, he began to write songs in glorification of them. He composed one particular Sanskrit book. It was called Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita. And in this book, he gives very specific instructions about how one should worship Krishna, Sri Chaitanya, and the Guru, the spiritual master. Very, very clear instructions in this way. So this is a very, very wonderful book that if you're able to get a copy of, there are translated copies available. Matter of fact, I think Krishna.com has it in their collection. Then it's very instructive in this matter of worshiping Guru, Gauranga, and Krishna. So many of the songs that he wrote dealt with the mood of separation that is prominent amongst advanced devotees. Particularly these books, these songs are found in his one book called Parakalpataru. This was a particular book of songs of separation that he expressed in his feelings of separation from the Lord in service. Now, an interesting thing about Narahari, he was actually the only person that had the, as we use the word adhikar, the right, had the privilege, the permission almost, to glorify Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by doing Gaura Kirtan in front of Gaura himself. Now, ordinarily, if anyone began to praise Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he would immediately close his ears and say, Vishnu, 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 like this. He didn't want to hear it. Now, this is very instructive because we know from the different Shastras, Srimad Bhagavatam, the different Puranas, that the Lord is known as Tri-Yuga Avatar, that he appears in 3 yugas. We don't find a particular incarnation, if you will, of the Lord here in the Kali Yuga. We find that he's described in the Kali Yuga as a covered incarnation, that he appears as a devotee who is engaged in the activities of devotional service to Lord Krishna. This is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so he did not like to be addressed as the personality of Godhead, except by his most intimate associates in the most intimate of confines, such as the pastimes at Srivasangam, at the home of Srinivasacharya. Excuse me. We find that in these intimate nighttime kirtans, he would sometimes perform the activity of revealing his divinity as the personality of Godhead, sitting on the altar and manifesting the forms of Raha or the forms of Nrsimha, are, taking up the worship, accepting the worship of the devotees like this. But this is for the most intimate of associates. So in public, he didn't allow that. Yet, somehow or another, Narahari, however, enjoyed this special privilege of being allowed to sing about Mahaprabhu in this very unique mood and with very sweet descriptions of his transcendental beauty and of his transcendental potency and of his divine character without any objection from Mahaprabhu, which was very, very uncommon. He simply didn't allow that. Now, we want to make one point here because it's a common misunderstanding, a common source of confusion, because we have two major devotees in the pastimes of the Lord. Narahari Shakar Thakur and Narahari Chakravarti Thakur. And they're both very, very well known. It's quite common that they get confused for one another. Narahari Shakar Thakur, who we're discussing today, wrote a number of books, Bhakti Chandrika Patal, which is a Vaishnava manual on proper sadachar behavior, the aforementioned Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita, which discusses the topics of Guru Tattva, the Chaitanya Sahasranam, which is 1008 names in glorification of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Sri Sachinanda Astakam, which is 8 prayers glorifying Sri Sachi, the son, Sri Sachinandana, as the son of Mother Sachi, and the Sri Radha Astaka Sahasranam, the 1000 names of Srimati Radharani. So these are some of the books he has written. And as we've mentioned, he was a great poet and songwriter and dancer. The other personality, and being from Srikanda, is Narahari Chakravarti Thakur. And Narahari Chakravarti Thakur is the author of the very famous work, which we've quoted this evening, of Bhakti Ratnakar. Bhakti Ratnakar is what you might say the foundation of the second generation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates for their pastimes. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, written by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, is considered the preeminent, the most sublime source of all of Mahaprabhu's pastimes. The philosophy, the presentation of his pastimes and all that is there is very, very wonderful indeed. And so this describes many of the intimate and close associates of the Lord as well, because to discuss the Lord means to discuss his devotees. To hear about the Lord means to hear about his devotees, because the Lord is never alone. He's always associating with his devotees. So in the same way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was always surrounded by the devotees. Even in his the later pastimes in Jagannath Puri, when he was confining himself to his own mood, still he was surrounded by devotees. Govinda, Sarup Damodar, like this. So in this way, the Chaitanya Charitamrita provides us with that information. But these devotees then in turn made other devotees. Most prominently, the second generation includes Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das Thakur, Shamananda Pandit, Rasikananda, so many devotees like this. So in this way, Bhakti Ratnakar describes the character, the activities, the lives of these devotees of the second generation, the second wave of Mahaprabhu's associates, some of whom may have had some of the association of the Lord, and some of whom came a clear generation later and had none of the association of the Lord except through associating with the Lord's associates. So in this way, the confusion is sometimes made. And even making the confusion even more difficult is the fact that all of the songs of Narahari Shakar Thakur are quoted at different places and used in the Bhakti Ratnakara. And these songs, as well as the songs of Narahari Chakravarti Thakur, who was also a poet, a musician, a songwriter, are both presented. And both of them, in humility, finished their songs as Narottam and many others did. Thus sings Narahari. Thus prays Narahari. Narahari laments in this way. So it's not always very easy to tell which songs are written by whom. Their glorification of Gaura Lila, of the pastimes of Krishna like this, they bear the same name, they both end their songs in the same way, so sometimes it's a little difficult to find out which one is which. But it is important that we know which devotee has rendered which service, and keep a clear understanding on that. So, speaking of the songs of Narahari Chakravarti Thakur, excuse me, there's one song he wrote that I'd like to read. I'm sorry, Narahari Sarakara Thakur. See, I've just done it. Actually, I was discussing with a very dear friend, Dhruva Maharaj Das, yesterday, and this confusion came up as well. So Narahari Sarakara Thakur, one of his songs in glorification of the Lord. If Gaura came back to Nadia town, my mind would be filled with joy. Then I would see him, the source of all joy, performing his kirtan pastimes. Oh Hari, when will I again gaze upon that moon-like face? When will that day come when the dam holding the ocean of separation in my heart breaks? Very poetic. When will I see the golden form of Lord Gaura Hari wrapped in his Yajna Sutra? Lifting my arms in the air, I will shout, Hari, Hari, and dance in the midst of him and his devotees. Saying such things, many of Gaura's devotees close their eyes and merge into love and remembrance of him. When will Narahari's desires be filled? When will he gaze again upon the form of that young Gauranga? So very, very nice prayer. The reason I particularly brought these pastimes of Narahari Sarakara Thakur out is just this past week was his disappearance day. It was actually on the Ekadasi, and the Ekadasi was Thursday of last week, and that was his disappearance day. It was interesting because his disappearance day was on an Ekadasi, which we'll describe a little later, but it mentions that at his funeral ceremony, that the ceremony was officiated over by Srinivasacharya. Now you remember from other places where we've read about the installation of the deities at the first observed Gaur festival, that the Pandit, if you will, the Purohit performing all the activities, was Srinivasacharya. He was very, very well known for his performance of different pujas and samskaras and activities of this nature. He was very expert in this. So he was there and he performed the funeral ceremonies for Narahari Sarakara Thakur. And it mentions that Nityananda's own son, Veerbhadra Gosai, as well as many other important Vaishnavas, had all come to Srikhanda to celebrate this disappearance festival. Now, Bhakti Ratnakar gives a very, very nice description of this pastime. Now, because we have referred to Bhakti Ratnakar so many times this evening, and because the life and some of the pastimes of Narahari Sarakara Thakur are described by Narahari Chakravarti Thakur in his book Bhakti Ratnakar, I wanted to read this section of Bhakti Ratnakar as it describes the devotees observing the disappearance day celebration. Not the actual day of his disappearance, but the celebration in honor of that. So we're reading from the 9th wave, or the 9th chapter of Sri Bhakti Ratnakar. So I'm just going to start here. What has happened is that the devotees have just finished the pastimes of observing the Gaur Purnima festival in Keturi Gram, and now they've been escorted to different places of pilgrimage. At this point, Raghunandana Thakur, Raghunandana Thakur has escorted all the devotees to Srikhanda, which is his hometown, and as we mentioned earlier, the residence of so many wonderful Vaishnavas. So, Sri Raghunandana then escorted the beloved devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sri Khanda, where they were warmly received by the people of the village of Sri Khanda. Everyone felt happy to have the great Vaishnavas in the village, but in their happiness, they also lamented knowing that these devotees would soon depart for their different places. Still, they were confident that the devotees would stay long enough to observe a nice festival commemorating the disappearance of Sri Narahari Shakar Thakura. There were only 4 days left until the festival, and the villagers knew that the whole of the village of Sri Khanda would be flooded with the vibration of the Harinam Sankirtan. People from outside of Sri Khanda also flocked to the village to witness the grandeur of this festival. On the morning of Ekadasi, Sri Raghunandana dedicated himself to all the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu present. Thereafter, he then went to the courtyard of the Sri Gauranga temple and enthusiastically began to decorate it. You remember that Narahari was ordered by the Lord to install 3 deities of himself, one of which was here in Sri Khanda. All the devotees appreciated the fine decoration of the pavilion, and everyone was enchanted by the beautiful deity of Sri Gaurachandra, the life and soul of Sri Narahari Shakar Thakur. It was decided on that day that Srinivas would recite verses from Srimad Bhagavatam and explain their meanings. Raghunanda was very happy with this decision, and he at once arranged for nice seats for the invited devotees. After Sri Raghunandana affectionately escorted Srinivas Acharya to his seat, all the devotees requested him to begin the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. They assured him they would enjoy his recitation, so he should feel no hesitation in speaking. Srinivas Acharya bowed down to the lotus feet of the great devotees and then offered a flower, tulsi leaves, and sandalwood paste to the holy book of Srimad Bhagavatam. He began his recitation with the Mangalacharana. His voice was sweet, like that of a cuckoo, and the entire audience became enchanted by his recitation. He cried as he recited the verses describing the rasa dance, and then he explained their meaning in a very sweet language. The audience was fully satisfied by his recitation. Enchanted by Srinivas Acharya's sweet voice, some of the exalted devotees declared Sukadeva Goswami certainly had empowered him to speak. Other devotees expressed the feeling that Srinivas must have been empowered by Srila Vyasadeva so that he could explain the verses so clearly. Still, another devotee felt it was the mercy of Gadadhar Pandit that enabled Srinivas Acharya to speak so sweetly. Others gave credit to Srivas Pandit, saying that it was his mercy that enabled Srinivas Acharya to speak so wonderfully about Lord Gauranga. Some expressed the feelings that it was Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu himself who was explaining the verses through the mouth of Srinivas Acharya. Time passed unnoticed because all the listeners were completely absorbed in the sweet recitation of Srinivas Acharya. Finding that the day was soon becoming night, Srinivas Acharya stopped reading the Bhagavatam, offered obeisances to the book in a most humble manner, and then lay prostrate before the feet of all the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Raghunandana directed the followers of the Lord to assemble in the courtyard of Lord Gauranga without delay. They then decorated the pavilion and arranged everything for the performance of Sankirtan. Sri Raghunandana brought the kol, kartals, and other musical instruments so that the chanting could begin without delay. He then invited all the great devotees to come. First there was Sandhya Arti, and then the Sankirtan began. All the devotees were very happy to see the nice arrangements of musical instruments, scented sandalwood paste, and beautiful flower garlands that were kept in various containers. Sri Raghunandana had arranged for sandalwood paste and flower garlands for each devotee, keeping them in separate containers. He requested each devotee to accept his humble offerings. Sandalwood paste and flowers were also offered to the coal and to the cartels. Sri Raghunandana and Sri Lochan Das then took sandalwood paste, flower garlands, and offered them to Krishna Mishra and Sri Gopal, the sons of Advaita Acharya. All the devotees were enchanted by the beauty of these two Vaishnavas. They also decorated the body of Sri Virabhadra with sandalwood paste and flower garlands. Then Virabhadra instructed Srinivas Acharya to give him the sandalwood paste and garlands, and he in turn himself offered it to Sri Raghunandana. Sri Raghunandana became embarrassed and perplexed by Virabhadra's gesture as he turned and offered sandalwood paste and flower garlands to Srinivas Acharya. It was a beautiful scene, with the great devotees exchanging sandalwood paste and flower garlands among themselves. The story goes on to describe how the kirtan then began, and it mentions a blind man who was listening to the kirtan ask one other man, "Who is the name of the dancer that is dancing?" Then he heard the name Virabhadra, and he thought that name contained enough power to sweep away all the evils of the world. For the name Vira means one who destroys the wicked, and Bhadra means one who protects the good. So he lamented his blindness and begged the Lord silently to correct his misfortune, for he would then be able to behold the form of Virabhadra dancing. His crying at such touched the heart of Nityananda Nandana, Virabhadra Prabhu, who glanced affectionately toward the blind man. Immediately the blind man's vision was restored, and he became mad with joy. A tremendous ovation acknowledged the glories and mercy of Sri Virabhadra Prabhu. The devotees passed the entire night in Sankirtan, crying as they remembered the pastimes and the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lifting their hands into the air, they called out the names of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Ram, Sri Advaita Acharya, Sri Gadadhar Pandit, Sri Haridas Thakur, Sri Vas Pandit, Sarup Damodar, Ramananda Roy, Sri Madhava Ghosh, Bashu Ghosh, Murari Gupta, Mukunda Dat, Gadadhar Das, and Narahari Shakar Thakur, remembering all the names of these associates of the Lord that were no longer with them. The devotees repeatedly requested Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to appear before them once again, along with all of these associates. As they rolled on the ground in despair and separation, their bodies became covered with dust. The sound of their crying filled the air. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could not restrain himself and his affection any more, and so he appeared before the devotees on this momentous occasion of this kirtan. In this miraculous appearance, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pacified his devotees in many ways, took away their miseries, and drowned them in an ocean of transcendental happiness. With great satisfaction, the devotees bowed to one another, embraced each other, and shared their tears of joys. The night passed, and in the morning they observed the Mangalarti of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After observing the sublime behavior of the great devotees, the village people all began to shout out the names of Hari, Hari. Still, the people had various opinions. One person lamented the short duration of the night and blamed Providence for that. In his opinion, such an Ekadasi as this was very rare in one's life. On that day they had experienced the shower of love that had been exalted by the devotees' kirtan. Another person commented that the Vaishnavas had important qualifications if they could fast the entire day and night. Another person said that if it is only possible for the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to observe the Ekadasi in this way. One other person felt he would never again eat on an Ekadasi. Whoever ate or offered food to anyone on Ekadasi would be committing a great sin, he felt. However, another person felt that one who had received the mercy of the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could properly observe the fasting on Ekadasi. With great humility, a man questioned whether he could receive sufficient faith in observing Ekadasi because he was a sinner. Another person expressed his ignorance about the sanctity of the auspicious day, while someone else lamented his misfortune at not having the opportunity to prostrate himself at the lotus feet of all these great Vaishnavas. One man tried to console those who were lamenting, and then all the people went to the courtyard of the temple where the Sankirtan was still going on. By this action, they were able to receive the mercy of the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The devotees greatly appreciated the efforts of Sri Raghunandana to arrange such a wonderful Sankirtan festival. It was the opinion of one person that whoever received the affectionate embrace of Sri Raghunandana would certainly obtain the mercy of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Another person especially appreciated Sri Raghunandana for his kindness towards the poor, worthless, and miserable people. In this way, the devotees all appreciated how he had arranged for such a nice festival. While the devotees had discussed the good qualities of Raghunandana, he actually came. He was embarrassed to hear their talks of himself because he was a very humble person. He asked the devotees how they should observe the Dvadasa Purana. The devotees suggested they should celebrate Dvadasi by having the prasad of Sri Gauranga all together. Sri Raghunandana was very happy to hear this suggestion, and without delay he gathered the varieties of ingredients and ordered his disciples to cook many nice preparations. The devotees returned home and performed their routine morning activities such as bathing and chanting of their prayers and mantras. Meanwhile, many things were cooked, and the pujari offered them to the deity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After Sri Chaitanya had eaten, the pujari took the prasad from the deity room. Sri Raghunandana then called all the devotees of the Lord and showered them with the numerous preparations that had been offered to the Lord. They were very pleased, showed them the numerous preparations that had been offered to the Lord. They were very pleased to see the great variety of food that had been offered to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After the arati was performed, the devotees all took their seats. Servers placed banana leaves and cups of scented drinking water before each devotee and carefully offered each one the prasad of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Within the temple, the devoted pujari affectionately performed his duties of putting the Lord to rest. He then bowed down to the Lord repeatedly and left the deity room and began to also serve prasad to all the devotees of the Lord. This is a very nice example that the pujari not only engaged in the service of the Lord but also in the service of the Vaishnavas. He distributed both cooked food and fruit to the devotees, and afterwards he gave them the sanctified water, the Charnamrita, that had washed the feet of the Lord. The devotees then requested Sri Raghunandana to eat with them, but he humbly refused, saying that he preferred the pleasure of watching them eat. They loudly chanted the holy name of Sri Hari and began to take their prasad. Sri Raghunandana enjoyed observing this scene with great satisfaction. In this way, the pastimes go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So this is how the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the second generation, observed the festival of the passing of Sri Narahari Sarakara Thakura, who we've taken some time today to describe and speak about, and would wish and hope and pray that all of you will take time and try and acquire a copy of Bhakti Ratnakara and read these wonderful pastimes yourselves. So we're going to finish there this evening. Any of you that have any questions, Manjesh joined us, I mentioned, but then we also had Chuck 108, who's a very regular member, join us. Back to Godhead Prabhu, or Prabhu Ini, whichever, joined. Vaibhav is back. So any of you that have any questions or anything you would like to discuss, feel free to join into the chat room and post those up for a bit. This book, for those of you that may be interested, Bhakti Ratnakara, I can hold it up here so you can see. Yeah, there we go. Bhakti Ratnakara. There. There we go, just like that. This is available through Krishna.com. If you have a desire to get it, you can go to their website during the day and find out how you can order this book. It's filled with wonderful and nectarian pastimes. So, in this way, we feel very honored and appreciative to be able to share these pastimes of the Vaishnavas with you. One devotee was asking me, he said, how long do you think you'll be able to continue like this? And I thought for a moment, I have no ability to continue at all, but the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are unlimited. So with the blessings of all of you and with the blessings of my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, we'll be able to continue discussing the pastimes of the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for many, many, many weeks and weeks to come. So with that, we will finish this evening. Thank you very much for joining us once again for this chapter in the lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. I'm your host, Chaturatma, and look forward to joining you again next week. Hare Krishna.